Good day, everybody. Wolf Driver coming at you live once again. We're at the New Style Independent Studios. We're actually in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and that's where New Style's located. Rod's studio. He's my producer, and he's gone in where we did the Wolf Driver documentary together. He's the guy responsible for it. And in case you haven't heard about it, it's a documentary. Worked on it probably for 5 years from concept to final production, and we hope to have it on a streaming platform real soon. But in the meantime, you can go to dogdocumentary.com and find out more. And of course, while I'm live, you can ask me any questions, concerns, comments, shout outs, anything to do with the documentary, or quite frankly, anything to do with the Wolf Driver. So on the screen behind me, depending on where social media you're watching this on, is a more recent Wolf Driver on tour dog adventure, I call them Mush Adventure, where we went to a place on the C&O Canal towpath. If you're not familiar with the C&O Canal, it runs one of the longer trails in the whole United States, where it runs bikeable trails, I should say, or recreational trails, if you will, from Georgetown, Washington, D.C., into Cumberland, Maryland. And it was originally designed, it was a canal, it was built in the late 1700s to early 1800s. Really interesting history. And the canal, what they would do is they would put ships for transportation, maybe passengers, I'm not sure, and they would have like a donkey pulling the ship, if you will, and it would just be by a tow line, basically, and it would pull it slowly, and they have locks on there so they could adjust the water level, whether they wanted to make it go upstream, downstream, to help the flow of the water and movement of the cargo or the ship, whatever. So they set out to build this. I mean, 200 miles, 184.5 technically, I believe, is a long way, in case you didn't know. So, by the way, what you're looking at is one of the best kept secrets on the canal, what I consider. That's the Potomac River. And the Potomac River is world famous because you can see it in almost any film, documentary, whatever you see about Washington, D.C., you'll get glimpses of the Potomac River because it kind of surrounds it, or at least it's visible in a lot of parts. Washington, D.C. isn't very big itself. So a lot of access points to it. If you're coming from Virginia, you cross the Potomac River. If you're coming from Maryland, you might see it, or you might see signs for it. So it's world famous. And we are on, when I say one of the best kept secrets, it's called Big Slackwater. So if you want to write that down, or if you ever think you're going to be there, a lot of people will come to the C&O Canal towpath to ride it. It's a vacation spot. A lot of people in the spring, summer, maybe fall will go there because there's so much history. From Antietam is near there. I believe Antietam Creek crosses or comes very close to the C&O Canal towpath. That was one of the bloodiest days in Civil War history. Fort Frederick is close by, and Fort Frederick was one of the wars before this country was truly founded, I believe. So there's just tons of history, and that's what makes the trail such a interesting tourist spot. When you go to the C&O Canal, there's also a continuance of it, which is another, 150, maybe 200 miles, called the Great Allegheny Passage. And that goes from Cumberland. I mean, literally, there's a street you cross and you get right onto the Gap Trail to go from the C&O to the Gap Trail and go up to Pittsburgh. So you're talking 350, 400 miles relatively of straight through biking, which is pretty good. Now, the Gap Trail, Great Allegheny Passage, people call it the Gap Trail, in my neck of the woods, was originally supposed to be part of I believe, the canal, or maybe that was where the railroad was going to take over. And they never, back in the day, they never merged them. At some point in history, that became a railroad, and then they got rid of the railroad, and it became the Great Allegheny Passage, the trail. So there's really famous tunnels on there, really long. The Brush Tunnel is one of the more famous ones, I believe. And I've been pretty much through the whole Gap Trail. I have, actually, the whole entire. When I say right now I'm calling it the Mush Quest series. So what I mean by that is I take my dogs. This is all about my dogs. So if you're watching, you don't know me, I take the dogs pretty much all over the East Coast of the USA. And I'm there to adventure with them and to discover basically all history, but American history essentially, and also what it's like today. I love going to these little towns. Now they're steeped in history usually, how they got there, what they're all about. But then going to even some of the modern places. So we've actually mushed through Washington, D.C. itself, going back about 10, 12 years ago. So I just want to take my dogs. I want to give them all kinds of experiences. And I'm talking about other generations of dogs too. I've had Huskies for about 30 years. I've been doing this now. So it's just, I'm all over the place looking for trails, looking for new ideas, because a Husky is just so intelligent and they need to be challenged on such a level that, quite frankly, I can't give them enough exercise. So they're used to going their traits 50, 100 miles a day in some of the harshest conditions on earth, some of the coldest, windy, blizzard-like. I mean, they're pretty much, I say they're like infinity. They can almost go on forever. And I'm getting off topic here, but I'm just going into a little bit of history. Their metabolism, their body design, the circulatory system is just all about endurance and short rest needed to just keep going and going and going. In fact, their metabolism is so I call it like a scientific wonder, and you can read all about it. I have it on one of my websites. It's Balto. I think it's actually on baltotogo.com. Balto Togo were some of the lead sled dogs, what the Iditarod race is all about. They got the serum. I'm going off here. The serum from to Nome, because there was no other form of transportation. Dyspharia, a disease broke out, and the serum, I think the disease was diphtheria. I'm probably saying that wrong. I know I am. But it broke out, and the only way to get the serum to that town, because of transportation, I think there was snow, obviously. It's up in Alaska. And it went to Nome. The history's all on my website. But the only form of transportation was sled dogs. And Balto and Togo are the famous sled dogs that led the team. It was like a relay. And it was covering like 1,000 or 1,100 miles, whatever the Iditarod race commemorates that. So going into history, way off topic here, but the CNO Canal, what you're seeing behind me, this big Slackwater, is really incredible. And my understanding was it got washed out. I'm thinking in the 80s, one of the big storms, one of the big hurricanes came up the river, and it messed up the trail. So they rebuilt it. It's a federal trail, so they have federal money. They rebuilt it when they got the allocation for the money. Probably, I'm going to say in the 90s, maybe 2000 up to 2010. Could be wrong. I'm not positive on these dates. And they made it like a cantilever bridge, if you will, that stretches through this part of the Potomac. And I'm going to say it's about couple miles, the whole area. So maybe 2, maybe 3 miles. Really interesting, because you feel like you're in the river, and it's not really scary, but I've done it at night actually. So it's really wide. I'm pretty sure you could get 2 trikes through there. A trike is what my electric dog sled on wheels is built on. So whenever I do it, though, I have a team. Somebody's in front in the beginning of this area, and someone's at least the next section. This is done in sections all together. When I told you that mileage, and I'm not sure the mileage, but so what happens is you get this big cantilever. It looks like a new bridge, because it relatively is, to go on for maybe half a mile or mile. And then there's some ground that they left there. They didn't build that bridge on it. That gives you a little more room in case people have a broken down bicycle, or you're coming through with some wider bikes. Everybody can fit through. But the cantilever part, the newer part that they actually made the bridge out of, is pretty generous, relatively speaking. But I always have somebody with our walkie-talkies, a system, just to make sure. There's almost never anybody there. I mean, you might see one person, 2 people, etc. Biking, walking, whatever. So what happens is if there's somebody they know we're there, we know they're there. Sometimes we've flown the drone. Now you can't, from what I remember, you can't fly the drone in the park from CNO because it's a national park and you're not allowed to. So we are outside the park when we operate it, but the airspace you can fly in. So again, we can do some that's the part I was telling you, one of the parts that is not part of the bridge. So we do some reconnaissance and we go over and just see where people are, what it looks like traffic wise. Truly incredible. I've done this part of the trail because it's my favorite part about probably, a half a dozen or more times. We've had the drone fly it. I've done it with different generations of Huskies. If you go to my newest site coming up, mushquest.com, that should be live in the next week or so, you'll see many instances of us doing it. Sometimes I filmed it with the 360 camera, so you can steer the camera and you can get a good look at it. So the CNO, steeped in history. And I'm also making some of the highlights of what I found, some of the best parts of the CNO. Remember, it starts in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. So there, of course, it's really urban-like, and they have a dedication where they might have one of the locks working, and they might even have the mule or the donkey that used to show how it actually operated. Can't remember, but it's a pretty cool. I haven't spent much time at the DC part. I've done it once, actually, because it's just so crowded there. Once we get in there, or I might have been through there twice, but once we get in there, it's a ton of people. You can only imagine in DC. But from that point on, it goes up to Great Falls. And Great Falls, if you don't know what it is, it's actually Great Falls, Virginia. So DC is the starting point. Great Falls, which is in the first 15 miles. I think it's mile marker 14 or something. And I couldn't take the dogs to it. There's a bridge that goes out. Not this bridge I'm talking about at Big Slackwater. Big Slackwater's at mile 85. But at the Great Falls, you can look over, and I mean, it's like you're at Niagara Falls. It's incredible. Especially if they've had a lot of precipitation when it's roaring. I don't think anybody could ever whitewater rapid kayak it or anything. I think it's way too. It's like Niagara Falls. I mean, that's the kind of water movement there. Really interesting to see. So you can go up on this bridge. I'm always with the team. Great Falls is a really busy area too. And I'm always with the team, of course, so someone's able to watch the dogs on the electric dog sled on wheels. Over the years, I've done this, and I just go up on the bridge and check it out. It's like, wow. If any of these spots, if you're not from this part of the country, if you're not from the East Coast of the USA, even if you are, you can go on Google, you can go on YouTube and type in Great Falls, type in CNO Canal, Washington, D.C., and you'll see some pretty cool stuff. So I'm just going to keep talking about the CNO because it's so fascinating to me, and I've been working on this for the website. So it's fresh in my mind. So from Great Falls, you'll get one of my next best finds is along the way. So it goes from the city of Washington, D.C., up the trail, passing through Great Falls, and you get into some cliff-like areas. When I say cliff-like, there's rock mountains, and sometimes you'll be able to see some caves in there. And we've actually done a little bit of caving with the dogs. So again, because I'm usually with the team out here, sometimes it's a bigger team because we want to do some really cool adventuring off the trail or on the trail at a tighter spot, etc. And I've taken the team. I've taken one dog. Previous generations, a couple generations ago, I had my dog Princess with me, and she went into the cave, and it was at night. So it was kind of eerie, but very interesting. And then with Jag and Chase, last generation of Huskies, Zorro, we went up to, and I'm not sure if Princess was there or not. Yeah, she was probably there. We went up to one of the caves during the day, and it was just incredible. We had to climb a little bit up, but that's all on my YouTube channel that you can see that. There might be some Instagram and Facebook posts about it too. Really cool. I mean, these caves are, I've never been to a cave before I was on the CNO, and we had spotted them. Nobody told us about them, and one of the teams spotted them, and then we made the proper arrangements so we could go to it. Now, you don't have to arrange it with anyone on the trail. These are open. You can go to. There's this one I didn't make it into, but my team did because it was so interesting, and we found a history. I'm going to call it a cave, but it's a huge opening in the mountain, and it doesn't go very far in, but it's enough that I think there's a big rock that shields it as well from weather, etc. And we found out through looking at history that during the Civil War, some people took refuge there because it was either, I don't know if it was, I can't remember, if it was stormy conditions or the battle was intense right near there. But that was like, whoa. And when you go into these places that it's from the Civil War, and of course they haven't developed it at all, they haven't restored it, whatever, it's just like it was, you're like, that's incredible. It really takes you back in time. So that's another cool part of it. Big Slackwater, again, along the C&O, another great area. And these are all areas that you can access by just riding through the C&O, and they have a lot of signs that talk about it. There's a place called Falling Waters, and Falling Waters was where they had to cross the canal, and they tell you which side, north side, who was doing it. I can't remember, but they had actually crossed the canal. One of the famous generals, and they were, when they're in the canal, I guess the canal, they had to cross the river, the Potomac River. So it was like up to, they said it was maybe a low time of water there up to their stomachs. Really interesting. You can look that up, Falling Waters. Not to be mistaken, which isn't that far, relatively speaking. Falling Waters, the Frank Lloyd Wright, one of his architectural wonders. But that's in Pennsylvania. I believe it's a house that was built on top of water. I'm getting off track here. But by the way, in the video now, we're getting to, I think, see, that's the towpath close. That was for some restoration along this big Slackwater. So we're on the electric dog sled on wheels. And on that, everything is modular. So we actually pull, if you continue to watch the video, we're going to pull out where the dogs are attached, what I call the mushing bar, and we're going to walk it around to turn around, because we certainly couldn't turn it over. We don't want to wind up the Potomac River. We certainly couldn't turn it over, the bike, by going too far out. So the dogs are great. They're trained to do all the adventuring I do. So we pull the pole out. On this particular adventure, that's who I call the old wise man. That's Jimmy, and Jimmy's been part of my Wolf Driver adventures and dog lifestyle for 20 years now or more. And there's Danny, and Danny is Danny's been, I call him Dan the Man, and he's been with Wolf Driver, the pit crew, for probably I'm going to say 10 years or so. So Dan's the strong man on campus there, the big man on campus. So he's going to pull it apart, and he and I are going to turn it around as Jim kind of navigates us. So it's pretty interesting. We I call it trail adversity, because you never know. These aren't like highways. These trails can get washed out. They can have trees down. They can have dogs loose on them. So usually you don't know what you're dealing with till you actually get there that day. Sometimes they don't update the websites, and the trail says it's closed and it's open, or it says it's open and it's closed, on a lot of different trails. That's not just part of the C&O. But the C&O is a trail that I've done from the beginning almost. I've done for many, many years, because there's so many different parts of it. And a lot of it was designated a national park by, I think, President Roosevelt. Don't quote me on it. And since then, I mean, it's never been developed or commercialized in any way. So you go through and you see these locks I talked about where they used to adjust the water level. Everything's defunct, the whole canal now. You might see water in it. It's just water that naturally puddles there. Some of it can be rather deep, the canal, and then you'll see dry parts of it. But you'll see the locks that were from back in the day. They're just, some of them just have, like, you could almost crank it open or closed yourself. I mean, it's pretty I'm going to say pretty well preserved, relatively speaking, and pretty incredible how it's just right there. You can fall down it. I mean, there's not like guardrails or anything. So you got to be careful, especially if you're with little kids or pets, etc. And the other, probably, I'm going to call it almost like a wonder of the world, is the Paw Paw Tunnel. How convenient, right? Or how appropriate, because I'm so much the Wolf Driver into dogs. PAW. And it's actually called Paw Paw, Virginia, so this canal, and I'm not sure the exact lay of the land. I've never really taken the time to study it, but some of it, I believe, it's usually Maryland is the one side, and if you look across the Potomac River, Virginia's on the other side. But it starts in Washington, D.C., and when I'm talking about these other areas like Paw Paw, that's in West Virginia, and then Virginia is Great Falls. So there's a lot of, in this Delmarva area, there's a lot of regions, of course, it's almost 200 miles of canal that it touches. But the Paw Paw is really interesting because it is eerie, and it's just like you're walking back, and it's a time capsule. What it is, it's a tunnel. It's a tunnel canal, and there's not that many tunnel canals, is my understanding, in the world. This was supposed to be, it's like 5/8 of a mile long. When they were building the C&O Canal back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they had a region, this mountain, which is in Paw Paw, Virginia, that they could either bypass somehow. They'd have to, I don't know how they would do it, of course, but they didn't know either. I don't even know if there is a way, but they could try to bypass it, and that would mean going up or around the mountain, or they could go through the mountain. So they said, you know what, we're going to go through the mountain. And it was scheduled to be a year, 5/8 of a mile through a mountain. Back in the day where I don't know what they had, but it wasn't much like we have today, of course, tool-wise, explosive-wise, etc. So they're going to go through this mountain, and they're going to continue the C&O Canal through the mountain, and they're going to take the canal, a waterway, through the mountain. And they have to have a path because they have to have the donkey that draws the ship through it. So this is all going to happen through the mountain. So that'll be pretty wide. So they set out to do this Paw Paw, and I'm going to look back on the video once again. We turn the dogs around. Dan's getting some pictures, and we're going to head back to the big Slackwater because we couldn't go any further. It continues another mile or so, by the way, at the point we were at. But that's the construction's over now. So through the Paw Paw Tunnel, they set out to blast their way through and get through it. Well, it took them 14 years. It's supposed to take them 1 year. And that was the demise, or the actual fall of the C&O, because at that point, there was no real transportation. That's why the C&O was going to be one of the greatest ways through from, again, Washington, D.C. to Cumberland, Maryland, and eventually on to Pittsburgh, was their design. But there was no other transportation. In that time, that 14 years, the railroad moved in there, and the railroad established itself. So people are like, we're going to do our shipping or transportation through using this railroad. And that's where the government, I believe, stopped funding or let the C&O Canal go bankrupt, the C&O Canal Company, whatever it was called back then. The Chesapeake and Ohio, of course. But, and I think it was the Chesapeake and Ohio Trading Company that started or owned the C&O Canal. So that was the demise of it, that they got through, they made the canal, and it got finished from DC to Cumberland, but it was never used the way they had intended, and never got the business they intended, because everyone went to railroad, because that 14-year span it took to build the Paw Paw Tunnel, it was everybody found another way, and that was the end of that. But again, talking late 1700s, early 1800s, somewhere I'm going to say in the 50s, it became a national park. So the Paw Paw Tunnel, though, is really interesting because they say it's haunted. You get all these stories. We've actually ghost hunted it. I've taken the dogs through it a couple of times. It's really narrow, the side where the walking side, where the donkey would pull the ship through. And I'm thinking donkey or mule, I don't know what it was that pulled the ships through. But that side is kind of narrow, and there's like a makeshift rail. I mean, literally, it looks like somebody went to Home Depot and took some 2x4s and built it. I'm not sure now. They did some remodeling over the past couple of years. Haven't been there since 2020. But I took one of the first generations of Huskies that I took through. We got there, and we were figuring out, we took the dimensions. We were wide enough, or we were narrow enough to make it through on the actual path through there. But the rail, that 2x4 rail I told you about, that keeps you from falling in about, I don't know, maybe it's a 4-6 foot drop off, and you're in the canal. And that has water in that part. So, and it's not really flowing. Again, this whole canal's defunct. So we're like, well, we'll take the dogs and we'll see how we do. And I had a couple teams with me that day. This was the first time I ever attempted. And we started going through the canal, the Paw Paw tunnel, and the dogs did not like it. The dogs on the inside, which were against the wall, the actual where they blasted the rock, they were okay. It's the dogs that were on the side of that cheap rail that was separating you from falling into the canal just did not like it. And they didn't like it because dogs usually, when they can see below them or they can see to the side being so close, there's a lot of dogs that are just not confident enough to walk that close to something they could fall into, essentially. And they know it. So they were not having it. And this is so funny because this relates to people saying to me, well, how do you know the dogs like doing what you're doing? Well, let me tell you something. I had two dogs that day. That was, and it depended what side, because we went through the tunnel both ways. Whatever dogs were on the side of the canal where they could see the water, they weren't going. So people say, well, how do you know the dogs like doing what they're doing? They weren't going. So I know they did not want to move in that situation. They just sat down and they just looked at me. They didn't cry. They just said, Dad, we're not going. And, of course, there was no way, and I would never do it, but there's no way to force them. They got to move. I mean, they become an anchor. So that blows away everybody's theory who says to me that they don't want to do what I'm doing, and I'm treating them poorly. So what we had to do was, because I had enough people on hand, enough Wolf Driver Pit Crew people, and I had enough bikes on hand, we took the two dogs that were going to be on the side, because, again, we went through the tunnel both ways. We had to put people on both sides of the tunnel to make sure nobody was coming through, to make sure they knew we were there, and to make sure for our safety and everything going on about it. We put the two dogs that were against the wall. We had essentially all four dogs that way because I used two of my electric dog sleds on wheels at the time. Again, the dogs were on the side. I didn't mention that. They were not like the configuration you see here. A lot of times back in the day, I was riding the dogs on the side of the bikes. So the two dogs that were on the side of the canal, we moved them on the inside of the wall, and one of my Wolf Driver Pit Crew guys drove them with me. We stayed right next to each other, so they were still with the team. And when we turned around, we had to switch the dogs on the other side so they were against the wall, if you can visualize this. Unfortunately, the first time I went through there, we didn't have any of the proper equipment to record it because we didn't know what the tunnel was about, essentially. I had a big crew out there. We knew we were going to go through it, but we had flashlights. But back then, I didn't have any infrared cameras, didn't even know about infrared back then, and didn't have LED bright lights because I don't think they were around back then. So we were using old school technology, so I wasn't able to document it like I normally would, but I've got it all up here in the hard hat or in the head or something like that. But it was really, if you can ever go to the Paw Paw Tunnel, do it. Now, future generations of dogs, and you can look on my website, you'll see that the next, it was the same generation. As they got older and they got more confident, I was able to ride all four on one of my tandem bikes, means tandem electric dog sleds, two people in it, and we went through the tunnel that way, and they were fine with it. So you can imagine as they got older, their spatial awareness is incredible. So they could sense the railing, they could sense the wall, and we probably had a half a foot on each side to spare before we couldn't move. That's how wide we were, or how narrow the path is through the tunnel. So really cool place. Just quickly, I'll mention that we were mentioned on, there's a website, and you might see it on social media. It's called Only in Your State. And they mentioned us because we investigated the Paw Paw Tunnel. So we're probably one of the more, maybe one of the only people to do that, at least that's publishing videos and got a following like I do. So it was pretty interesting. By the way, I didn't take the time to mention, I'm wearing, you're probably saying, what the heck is this? If you just thumb through the channel, any of the social media that we're on right now, what the heck is Wolf Driver, this guy wearing? So this is, and I'll take it off for a second, if I can get it off. This is my helmet, and it's got a camera on it. I'll take it off this one. And so what it does is, I'm trying to get it so everybody can see it. I mount cameras to it in different ways. This is the graffiti helmet, and I got just funky looking ones just so I can tell them apart. I know what I'm doing, and I like to be visible on the trail. Sometimes I can mount a pole to this, and you might have seen me in one of my other videos here, one of my other VODcasts, where I can put the 360. This is an Insta 360. I can put the camera out in front of me, so it actually can film facing me. And 360 means it films all over, and you can get a really cool perspective because it's so wide. It gives you just a vantage point that you really wouldn't see unless you had someone pretty much in your face holding the camera the whole way. So the 360 is incredible too, because depending how I publish the video, wherever we're publishing to, will allow you to steer the camera. And I have you can see, look at the rocks, just incredible. I have one of the 360 views up the big Slackwater, this section of the C&O Canal I'm talking about. And it actually, you can spin the camera and look. Now, it was back in the day when 360 first came out, so it's not as high resolution as something like this, but it still gives you an idea, certainly, of what the capabilities of the camera are, but it lets you explore a little without me picking how you look at this. So you can zoom in on a certain dog, or you can zoom in on some of the rock cliffs there, or the river, whatever the case may be. By the way, you can see it's got a little bit of a curbway. If you wanted to, you can hit that curbway and go over it. So I do have to steer the dogs pretty good. I mean, they're going to stay away from the edges, relatively speaking, but I'm not going to leave it all up to them. That's why I call myself Wolf Driver. I'm going to drive them the right way. So seems like I'm going on forever here. I'm going to check. Rod, do we have any comments or questions? Okay. So Rod said we have a couple comments or questions. So I'm going to pick up the iPad, got to put my glasses on here and see what we can do. If you can highlight them, Rod. So from Devin J. Hey, here's a shout out to you. Thanks for stopping by and saying hi. Really appreciate the comment, Devin. And from Mickey, them dogs really fit. They go, and are well looked after. True. So I think what Mickey's saying is that the dogs, Huskies and working breeds, are really meant to work and meant to be pretty physical. So when they're properly taken care of and given chances to engage in some enrichment, they go. And Huskies can go, like I talked about. They have an insatiable appetite for exercise. So thanks for your comment, Mickey. I really appreciate that. And from Design 3R, what's on your head? So I just explained. So this is how I'm wearing the 360 camera. I use this with all my cameras. So I'm using a helmet because some of the cameras are heavier. Even the GoPros, I'm out on the trail. I'm with the dogs 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours or more. So you can imagine anything on your head that isn't just like a hat or something that isn't minimal weight gets heavy. So I find that the helmet design really helps disperse that weight well and makes it more tolerable for a longer period of time. And I really am interested in getting my perspective when I document what I'm doing. And the helmet, this design allows me to do that. So, and there's all kinds of variations I do with a helmet where I can put the camera, put it in front of me, like I was talking about on an extension pole, put it behind me on the side, etc. So thanks for the great question. I really appreciate that. And Mickey, do you have voice commands, whistles, etc.? So great question. So Mickey asked if I have voice commands and whistles, how I use to steer the dogs. So I teach them voice commands. The genius, I'm calling it genius of my design, is that you don't really need any commands because the bike will essentially gently push them or direct them into the direction you want to go. That's why it's ideal for training the dogs, especially like a lead sled dog. So if we need to teach the dog the turning commands, like haul means to the left, G means to the right, you can say it as you're turning. That way the dog says, oh, that's what that means, because dogs are intelligent. They pick up on it pretty quick. There's other terminology, haul come around, haul over, G over, whatever direction you want them to move over, or you want to do a complete U-turn. Whoa means stop, easy, go slow. So again, these are all commands that can be done from the electric dog sled on wheels. And there's other things like that, like the Seiko cart, if you're familiar with that. That's how they were training a lot of lead sled dogs. A lot of mushers used to do it because, like my design, you can push them, you can direct them in the right direction, or pretty much make them cooperate with you, unless they just totally don't want to do it, then they stop, of course. But get them to do what you want them to do, because the cart can kind of direct them. I do teach them all the commands, though, because we do some off-leash work. We do different ways of tethering the dogs to different vehicles, ATV, etc. So when I tell them haul, they know we're going to the left. So they know what to anticipate, whether they're off-leash, whether they're on-leash, or whether they're tethered, etc. And it really is so beneficial. So it's really kind of like a plus that it comes with the way to teach them to do this. So thanks for the great question. Really appreciate that. Whistles, I use whistles too. I'm not as big on them lately, but with previous generations, I would use them for recall pretty much. So if they're out in the field, so I didn't have to yell real hard, I might be a little hoarse, I might be doing a VODcast where my voice starts going up. I can whistle to them. Now, when I say whistle, there's different whistles, and you can use dog whistles, which are different frequencies. They can, some of the higher end ones, you can adjust them to find out what frequency appeals most to your dog. And you can also try to make different commands for them, depending if you double whistle, triple whistle, what it might mean, whether it's recall, leave it alone, etc. So yeah, whistles can be really good too. I don't use them though when I'm on the electric dog sled on wheels. So this is a question from Audrey Mosher. So Audrey, my Husky Thunder loves learning, watching your videos with me. He wants to pull so bad. So that's so great to hear. Thanks so much for the comment and mentioning that, sharing that. So I make a lot of my videos I used to make what I call wolf dreams. So the dogs would wear the collars a lot of times. And it was like the dog that's watching the video can say, that's the dog's perspective. How interesting. I do try to make a lot of what I do, especially when I do live broadcast, educational, so others can see what I'm doing, take the lead, and go ahead and do it with their own Husky or do similar. When I'm on the bike, though, it's really easy. A lot of people say, how much training is required? What do I need to do to buy one of these whole apparatuses, etc.? So I don't sell anything. By the way, I used to actually do a lot of dog-powered sports sale, harnesses and equipment, etc. But with what I'm doing, you only really need a bike to start off and what they call some kind of Springer attachment. There's walkie dog attachments, I like the Springer, but whatever you like, your attachment of choice. Put the dog pretty much on the side of the bike and go. Now, a lot of people say, I would never attach my dog to a bike because it'll pull me over. So with the Springer, at least, it's called a Springer because there's a huge spring. And when you place it properly on the bike, like under your seat, the weight of yourself and the design of the apparatus is going to keep the dog from pulling you over and from even pulling you in the direction you don't want to go. So a dog sees a squirrel, wants to go after it, it can't. And that's what makes a lot of what we do so important, because the dogs don't have to be super well trained. They can just get out there and they can't really the only thing they can do is just not go if they don't want to do what you're doing, and not go as fast if they're tired or, God forbid, they're injured or something. But everything else, usually dogs are pretty rambunctious, especially the younger ones, the energetic ones, and they want to go in every direction. So the Springer will keep them, and the electric dog sled on wheels is kind of like the next step. But you can get started really inexpensively, and it can be of great physical health to you too, because you don't have to use a motor like I do. When I was younger, I would use the bike and pedal. So really great. Keep in mind, though, I know some watching maybe have younger dogs. With a Husky, usually it's like 2 years. You want to make sure, and you should always talk to your veterinarian first, but they call it their growth plates. If they've met, that usually means that they have stopped growing. So usually at that point, it's safe to do more sports where they have to be more exertive, more pulling sports, longer duration sports, etc. So you want to make sure that the dog's not too young. That doesn't mean you can't get exercise with a puppy. You can even put him on the side of the bike as long as he's not pulling. So that means you would have to go a little faster than his fastest speed, or the speed he's traveling, because you don't want him pulling. But if you're going that fast, you're running with, because they're usually running when they're puppies, you want to make sure that you don't work them too hard. So just a little bit tidbit to keep in mind. Thanks so much for the comment. And from Anthony, I know I can't say your last name, Lalarajada. Sorry about that. You're new here. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. People from all interest are interested in what I'm doing because whether you're into biking, because I go to trails all over the East Coast of the USA, you're into dogs because I'm running dogs, or you're into technology because I'm wearing funny looking hats with cameras on them, and I'm using all kinds of equipment to keep warm out there on the trail, from electric gloves and heated gloves and heated thermals and heated coats and all that good stuff. I'm using that. So a lot of different aspects here. And please feel free always to ask me any questions about anything. Like, how'd you do that? And even from the transportation, I'm using a lot of different equipment, from winches on my trucks to outfitted vehicles to travel over some pretty rugged terrain, 4-wheel drive, that kind of stuff. So a lot of interest. I appreciate you tuning in, and spread the word. And
a comment on Instagram from Sir Nichols06, which says, I have 3 huskies. I wish I could do what you do.
Okay, so on Instagram, for some reason, it doesn't come through on our feed. My producers let me know, from Sir Nichols06, commented that they have 3 huskies and wishes they could do what I do. And I really appreciate that. And that's why I'm here, because I want to I want to spread the word that almost anybody can do what I'm doing. The thing is, I've been doing it for 30 years, so I've evolved and I've learned a lot, and I want to share that wealth of knowledge. So I want to let you know, always when you train dogs to do almost anything, it's easier to start with one. So I've got 4 huskies. So if I need to train something new, I'll take one of them out at a time. And when I first get a husky or a dog, I'll take them to the bike, get them comfortable with the bike, teach them to run on the bike. Then I'll put them with one of the other dogs and do 2 at a time, 3 at a time, etc. So it's always best to do 1 at a time, because you can really focus on that one dog. There becomes, depending on the dog, sometimes you'll have some dogs that are really apprehensive and not confident, just unsure of themselves. So sometimes it's easier, if you have a really well-trained dog, to add sometimes a second one almost right away, to get them to learn that, oh, it's okay, and to follow in the footsteps of the other dog, one they would trust or know would help greatly. But keep in mind that the biggest bond you want to make, and if you've had 3, I'm sure you've already got that bond, is with you and the dog. So when you're teaching them something new, I can rely on Dad. Nothing's going to happen to me. Whatever Dad says or Mom says to do, I can do it. So to get started doing what I do, that Springer, this is all on my website, actually on dogmotorsports.com. I've got a few websites that it'll say there's a page there, getting started, and you can get that Springer. You can put it on almost any bike, electric bike too, and you can get out there and just run your dog up and down the street and see how they do. It's always good also to start very gradually for the physical capabilities of the dogs. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to be on your street, you don't want to just run too hard with the dog's pads and their claws and take a chance of injuring them. So you always have to build gradually. In addition, if you start going faster, the dogs have the traits built into them, believe me, especially huskies and working breeds have a lot of working ethics, and sometimes they want to overperform themselves. So we want to make sure we do it gradually to keep them, just like if you go to the gym, you don't start off lifting 1,000,000 pounds. You got to start slow and gradually build to that and get them in shape. But they get in shape real quick. And when you get to running up and down the street, just keep an eye on their pads. You can use booties. I like to develop mine, and a lot of people see me out there on the asphalt, and they're like, you should never do that. That's terrible. Let me go back and play my video again. I'm sorry about that. Actually, Rod, we don't need it. But if you do that, if you build slowly, you can build healthy callus. You can get their claws in proper condition, because you don't want them too short, because the bloodline's in there and you hit it, they start bleeding, and that's no good either, of course. But starting slowly and building on it. If it's you're too concerned, you can use booties. Some dogs need them sometimes. Some dogs need them all the times. I've done a lot of information on these live broadcasts about Paw Care, and you can go to Paul, Pawaware, PaulAware.com and find more. But I'd love to see you start out. A few people have seen me out there doing what I'm doing on social media, and they built similar bikes to what I have. I'm always willing to share any of my information. I don't sell anything. So, but one thing I don't do is a message on any of the social media. So please just put it in the comments section. If for some reason I don't respond, I almost respond to everybody. Put it out there again. It's no harm. And I'll get to you just as soon as I can. I wish you luck. And I'd love to see you get involved with it. And we start slow. That's with everything, because it's better for the dog to develop all the skills they need in a gradual way.
We got another Instagram comment from Dosey9876, who says, like to watch your dogs pulling the vehicle.
Okay, Dosey9876. Hope we're saying that right on Instagram. And Dosey said they like to watch my dogs pull in the vehicles. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in and comment. And yeah, a lot of people really enjoy it. Again, that's why I post everything I do. It's just every time I do it, I pinch myself. This is so cool. I love the dogs enjoying themselves in the healthiest way, and being able to give it to them pretty much anytime they want to go. Because again, whether I go up and down the street near my house, or I go on a trail that's up the street, essentially, or I travel 400 miles to go to a trail that I've never been to before, it gives them such euphoria. It's just incredible. It really stimulates them. And if you've been watching my videos, you see when I get them hooked up to the sled on wheels that sometimes they're uncontrollable. And I don't want to tamper that excitement or enthusiasm. I want them to go and I want them to give it all. I'm just trying to keep it everything together, because they've got such strength. They are so strong and determined that I don't want them to keep pulling and hurt themselves by just getting so excited, or of course damage any of the equipment. Now, usually that doesn't happen, but I'm just saying that's why I've got someone usually with them trying to keep them controlled until I can get in the seat and I can give them they say hike. People say, you say mush when they go, they say hike. Usually that's the go command. But usually once I let off that brake, they're going anyway. They don't need me to say nothing. It's when I got to stop. I got to start telling them and putting the brake on. So thank you so much. Really appreciate the comment. Anything else out there, Rod? Sure. So Audrey Musher, thank you for the reply. Thank you so much, Audrey. Again, I really appreciate it. I try to make myself as available as possible. So any comments, questions, or concerns, if we're not on the live broadcast, please just put it in the comment section of almost any of my videos, whether it's a reel or a short or any of the longer videos on YouTube, etc. And I'd love to comment and talk to you. So we've been on for about 46 minutes. I know I took a lot of time to talk about the trails. Just real quickly, yesterday I was on the Armstrong Trail, which is, I believe, above Pittsburgh. And I've gone on the Armstrong Trail before. Really cool trail. So I've started usually near Kittanning, Pennsylvania, it's called. It's a small town. And the Armstrong Trail is really a nice trail. And we have gone up the trail. I started in reverse this time, which I've done once before also. But it goes past an old, not an old one. It's a working dam. So a dam, like a man-made waterfall, essentially. But it is a dam. And it's big. And we went on that trail yesterday, 12 miles. Now, we were hoping to get 15 or more, but the problem was, sometimes, even though we meet at my house at 5 in the morning, it just was so far away. It took us so long to get there, which we had anticipated at the time, hence the reason we left at 5. We met at 5. But with all the fog and inclement weather, we rode through a lot of areas with snow. We didn't anticipate all that. So it took us longer to get there. So by around 4:30, it started raining. 5 o'clock, it gets dark. Most of the time, unless I'm set up for a nighttime mush, we're off the trail by 5 o'clock this time of year, because that's when it starts getting dark. But it started raining on us, too. It wasn't supposed to rain till a little later. So it was not quite as many miles as I wanted, but the dogs were so engaged, and we were having so much fun. And this part of the trail is so unpopulated. It's relatively remote. I mean, I think we might have passed one person. Some of it you do drive through some recreational kind of housing areas, maybe they're summer homes, etc. But when you get back in the sticks, it's pretty far back there. I never saw this, a skunk that was dead on the trail, so it either got injured and died there. We always have to look out for that because even dead animals don't want the dogs picking up. Again, they're out in front of me now on the electric dog sled on wheels like we were watching before. So they can possibly get to it before I can stop them, and that's why I have someone, a point man, I call him, my co-pilot, going ahead. So that's it in a nutshell. It was a great time yesterday, and I hope to post those videos coming up. But once again, I am the Wolf Driver, and this was one of my VODcasts. Hope to continue these. At some point, we're going to have some people interviewing me, maybe answering questions that you want to know, and that maybe you didn't think of, like stuff that relates to this. But it's funny because when I'm done here, I think, oh, I wish I would have mentioned this. I wish I mentioned that, because I'm doing all the talking except for the comments. Sometimes I forget. So it'll be helpful. It'll be a totally different perspective than you're used to seeing me with. And we hope to have that maybe next week. So have happy holidays if you don't see me before the holidays coming up, and Happy New Year. But again, same bat time, same bat channel next week. Wolf Driver signing off. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.